One Piece, well, it's great, isn't it? Last arc, the Straw Hats encountered a giant dolphin, giant people, and a colossal goldfish. All they got for it, however, was just a sick Nami, and maybe an eternal pose to Arabasta, but I'm starting to think that's not a fair trade for reasons. Though, in today's video, we'll be covering the first 5 or so chapters of Drum Island, the arc which better feature at least one house made out of a 5-piece acrylic drum set, or I'm gonna be hella temper tantrums about it. You have been warned, Uno Pieza. Though, become a Patreon, where you'll get access to my Drum Island Part 2 and 3 blind reviews like, I don't know, right now, but as well, Part 1 of my highly anticipated Arabasta reviews. Also, as well, another thing, if you're a Patreon, you can gain access to even more exclusive One Piece content and a link to my Discord server, which as well is in the description below, totally 100% free. So with all of that boring preamble, let's get into this. This is Drum Island, featuring 10% more paradiddles. We start the arc in an interesting manner. Sanji is crying, asking Vivi if Nami is going to die from her sickness. What a sip! And don't think I don't read my comments either, by the way. I do, and I'm not a simp for Nami, and I'm not the same as Sanji because of that. Anyone who calls me simp, by the way, will be banished to the Shadow Realm, and I'll just reply to your accusations with a, hey, neat comment down in the comments below. And let me tell you, I'll be laying in those extra exclamation marks.
You have been warned.
Back to more serious adulting conversations. My wife is sick, but as Vivi explains, being sick on the Grand Line is anything but good, as you would expect. Because of the chaotic climates of the Grand Line, it's actually very easy to catch a cold. Even the most hardened pirates of the Grand Line can and likely will get sick and even die, all of which are very common occurrences. So because of this, Nami is in need of a doctor. However, the only person on board who knows doctoring things is Nami, who is clearly not taking calls at the moment, so they're out of luck. Then we learn some truly horrific things. Sanji has been feeding Vivi and Nami perfectly balanced meals. Oh, the horror. While Luffy and Usopp essentially got the meals he would mess up on. Okay, maybe actually the horror on that one. Not cool, man, not cool! Though things get worse, as Nami's temperature is 104 degrees, a temperature that could potentially kill Nami if not gotten under control. So, her new goal is simple, find a doctor. Though, Nami awakes from her fever to be the bearer of bad news. A newspaper in Nami's desk shows that 300,000 soldiers have defected from Arabasta's royal army to join the rebels. This means that the rebel army has 700,000 soldiers, while the royal army only has 300,000, putting them at a disadvantage. The reason Nami kept this a secret from Vivi for 3 days, however, is because she didn't want her to worry about it. Though, with the way things are now, she kinda was forced to. Even worse, is Nami insists all of her sickness is just sunstroke and that she's okay. So, she says they need to stick to the plan and keep moving forward. So, keeping in time here, I just want to talk about some of my thoughts about this scene. I love the tenacity of Nami to keep going despite being stricken with a 104-degree temperature, though at the same time, this is not really the right place for her to do what she's about to do. I mean, they're on a ship without a doctor in the Grand Line where the climates are extreme, to put it simply. So her actions, in other words, are dumb.
What did you just say, Bill?
Ideally, she should be resting. And this is pretty much proven when taking up on her previous role. She simply has no idea what's going on. Though, either way, I respect that she's so tough that she just gets right back out there. As for Vivi, she's left with this new revelation as it sets in that if they don't get back to Arabasta quick, Crocodile will take over and her kingdom will fall into war. This was just a really good scene in general, and seeing how Vivi is handling all of this news, it is tough, but at the same time, I really feel for the gal. On the deck, it seems Nami is trying her best to lead the ship with a burning fever that actually literally burns Luffy's hand, though, as Nami even says herself, that's her normal temperature, so I guess that means, you know, she's hot, eh? You get it? Funny, right? Yeah, I'll see myself out then. Either way, they agree with Vivi's proposition to sail at full speed to Arabasta in a straight line to get Nami that doctor and to return Vivi to her kingdom. Though as Nami passes out from her fever, they come across, of all things, a cyclone? Even worse, the cyclone is actually in their way. Turns out that Nami was right about her earlier hunch when she had her fever. This is actually really impressive in my opinion, because even with a burning fever that's almost killing her, Nami is able to tell there is not just a change in weather, but there's a freaking cyclone in the way. That, my friends, is skill. Though because it's in their way, they decide to search elsewhere for a doctor, and during their search in the now winter season, Zoro actually potentially spots someone who's standing on water? So yeah, picking up the tempo a little bit, he doesn't spot a ship or anything like that. Zoro spots actually a guy standing on water. Then, emerging from the sea, SeaTactics, I guess you could say, a gigantic ship appears, which, surprises me just as much as it does the Straw Hats. The ship's crew then takes over the deck of the Going Merry, and there we are introduced to Walpole of 10, the captains of the 10 Tyrant Pirates. And don't let this bulbous figure fool you. He ate that sword. That's hardcore. So be frightened. Very frightened. And their goal is simple. They want to go to Drum Kingdom, and when they figure out the Straw Hats don't have opposed to Drum Kingdom, Walpole decides to familiarize himself with their belongings in a very interesting way. He starts to literally eat the Going Merry. Now, I don't have a huge appetite these days, but in my busking days, I could probably do about half a ship a day. So seeing Walpole here do this, that's pretty impressive, but I'm just saying, it actually used to be known as Eat Tactics, believe it or not, back in the old days. I was very talented at mastication, is what they used to say. However, the Straw Hats don't take this act of mastication lightly, and they go to battle with the Tyrants. Though interestingly enough, during the skirmish, some of the Tyrants yell out that Walpole holds the power of the Munch Munch fruit, which I assume, obviously, is, with this power, Walpole has the ability to eat his way through a pizza pie or two with no issues, if you catch my drift. Though, as Walpole detaches his jaw for maximum bitage, Luffy sends Walpole flying as the Tyrants look on befuddled. Good word, by the way, befuddled. Honestly, I'm surprised. Walpole just shows up and you think, oh, this guy's kind of a joke, but he literally started to eat the Going Merry, and then Luffy just sends him flying off? What? What just happened? What? And I think the shock on the 10 Tyrant Pirates' faces is pretty much my shock as well. There's a lot of mutual feelings in this chapter, I've started to notice. So, resuming their activities, they need to drop anchor somewhere, and soon, because the sun is going down, which will only make things worse for my wife. However, on the deck, they ponder what those tyrants were, though they quickly just ignore it. As would I. He ate a part of the ship, might as well just pretend that never happened. Though there is good news, maybe actually don't pretend that didn't happen. Fix it and then pretend that never happened. Though there is good news, they're coming close to a winter island of some sort, and Vivi knows this because the islands of the Grand Line are actually divided up into 4 types. So you have your normal ones, right? Summer, spring, autumn, and winter islands. And not only that, but they each have their own 4 seasons. So this really means that sailing the Grand Line, as Vivi puts it, you'll have to endure 16 seasons. Even then, though, there are unknown weather patterns, so the Grand Line, even when it seems certain in its turbulence, is really still a mixed bag when you dive into it more and more. Though, there is some sort of method to this madness, as stable weather usually means the sign of a nearby island, which makes sense if they're basing it off seasons, so it's a nice piece of logic I like. And, Vivi is right, as they come upon a new island. Drum Island. The very one the 10 Tyrants were looking for. As they plan to get ready to land on Drum Island to look for a doctor, they all are confronted by the people of, Drum Island, who consider them nothing more than dirty scallywags. Though there is justification, we'll get onto that later. They do open fire on the Straw Hats, which angers Luffy, to which Vivi actually has to hold Luffy back, who is fuming with anger. So now, with Vivi actually shot, she drops to her knees and begs for forgiveness and a doctor. Luffy, seeing this, clearly realizes he was in the wrong to get angry, so he apologizes and gets on his knees. And so, the people of Drum Island agree to take them to a doctor. However, there are some caveats. There's only one doctor, and they call her a witch. And just to say about this chapter, I enjoyed this. It showed that when clearly in the wrong and in a state of mind where he could realize he is wrong, Luffy does the right thing here and apologizes. And it's funny because while Luffy is a mad lad, the man also isn't stupid. And, well, I mean, if you know what I mean. He's kind of stupid, but you get what I mean. And while it's a small aspect of this humility that he sometimes brandishes, it's an aspect I love. It's a small one, but it's one that I think is important. They then learn from the island's inhabitants that the country they live in actually has no name. Which is actually sort of apt in this scenario because the island is a very strange one with bears walking around, just hiking. They are then introduced to the village, however, the Snow Village Bighorn, another apt name considering the gigantic horn-like structures which come out of the mountain, though a strange occurrence. Something they've noticed is that the civilians are armed. In other words, they're not real soldiers. On top of that, there is an election happening in 2 days, in which one of the candidates apparently is so popular that it's said everyone on the island is voting for him. This is when we learn of the kind man's name that has been leading them, Captain Dalton, a Drum Island civilian guard. Though, funnily enough, Dalton notices something about Vivi. He's seen her somewhere before. Obviously, she is the princess of Arabasta, though this little line of dialogue says quite a bit. For one, it shows how important the kingdom of Arabasta is in the world of One Piece, something that is obvious, but has it been widely confirmed in regards to the different and various islands so far? As well, and most importantly, Vivi is a known commodity of sorts. People actually notice who she is, and thus it puts into perspective what she's had to do so far to go undercover the way that she has. And I can't imagine how it was to keep your identity safe when you're the princess of, well, Arabasta, a kingdom in turmoil and revolt, something everybody is keeping their eyes on. Though, thankfully, Vivi is able to throw Dalton off, instead asking about the Witch of Bighorn. In the mountains known only as the Drum Rockies lies the 140-year-old witch, Dr. Kuroha, at the very tallest peak in a castle, and while she comes down sometimes to treat sick people and give out things to aid, it is rare. What's more is that she comes down on a sleigh, much like a certain bearded fellow we all know. Though some will even say she has a strange beast along with her, so, shit's about to get really real, dog. Though because of her rare visits, they can't wait a single moment, as Nami's fever keeps climbing, requiring the Straw Hats to themselves go into the Drum Rockies with Nami in tow to get her help. While the Straw Hats try to convince Luffy otherwise, Luffy decides, you know what? We gotta do this, and ties Nami to his back and begins his climb on the other side of the mountain. And the reason for this is because of the vicious flesh-eating rabbits called Lapins. So not only do we have Walpole, now we got flesh-eating rabbits too? What is this? An all-you-can-eat buffet? So they start on the other side. Is what I expected, but instead Sanji joins them and they take off into the mountain, directly through it, full-blown, through all those terrible critters, and I just love it, the smell of caution being thrown to the wind. And while they make their way up the island, we learn about the village. Apparently a pirate named Blackbeard came along with 4 other pirates and defeated their country, just 5 in total. Though some saw this as a blessing, as the island, formerly known as Drum Kingdom, was under the rule of one Walpole of 10. That's right, that dude, who they dubbed as the worst king ever. And I agree with that, just based off the fact of, you know what, he's easily hateable, we'll just say that.
Boo, you stink!
So they inform them of their meeting with the Man of Tin. And we learn that Vivi forgot that as a kid, she actually at one point met Walpole of Tin. So in all the confusion of the revolt and Blackbeard and the island and stuff, Walpole became a pirate. Which actually is in reality just a cover for him to be searching for another island to rule. And to make matters much worse, Walpole didn't even attempt to fight Blackbeard and his men at all, instead fleeing to their ship to escape the pirates. Vivi, hearing all of this, is angered, showing that she doesn't believe in a king who would abandon their people. And this to me really shows that she's not like most people where at first sight of trouble, she would flee. Nah, Vivi is real. She stays to fight and will do whatever it is that it takes, even if it is to leave and go undercover to somehow save her kingdom. Yeah, Vivi's got good character. So now Bighorn is stuck in a position where they are trying to rebuild, but fear that Walpole may return to restore the monarchy. Their attempts to build a new and peaceful nation would all be for nothing if that were to occur. So, as Sanji and Luffy are dodging many flesh-eating rabbits on their way to Dr. Kuroha, they talk about some really strange stuff. Sanji, for one, believes that people in cold weather don't actually sleep, because if they do, the cold would kill them. He also believes women in snow countries have white skin because they rub it a lot to keep warm, and thus the color of snow gets absorbed into their skin. And just so we know, just so you're clear, I'm also the president. Then they run into a pack of big chungus, or is it big chungai? Either way, they are actually the Lapins, and despite their size, they are just as fast as small rabbits and also attack in packs. You thought it couldn't get worse? Well, it got worse. Dr. Kuroha is in the other town, and boy, you just thought it couldn't get any worse, could ya? Walpole at 10 is also back, and they're headed for Drum Island. And you keep thinking, how could it get any worse? And you just had to think it. You just did. And it did get worse. There is crying children in the next town. Oh, that's not a bad thing, is it? But hey, at least we're formally introduced to none other than Dr. Kuroha herself and her beloved reindeer, Tony Chopper. Sounds like something you see on a box of cereal in the morning. So she treats the crying kid, and though it may look like torture, it wasn't that much. And it turns out that the kid had a bacterial infection, which needs to be treated with, obviously, antibiotics. So as payment for allegedly treating the child, she wants half of the store's assets. Seems reasonable. And reasonable she is, because she actually only ended up taking about 49% and not 50%. Like I said, y'all, that's reasonable, right? So, I gotta say, I am enjoying these first few chapters of Drum Island. Of course, I know about Tony Chopper. I'm just not sure how he turns into the lovable form we all love him as. That's really the only thing that confuses me right now. My ultra awesome SeaTactics theories on this, how that'll happen. Krillin dies and he becomes the legendary reindeer Super Chopper 2. Though, you know what? That's probably a really good theory to have. You know, I'm gonna write that down. Though I will admit as well, I really dig Dr. Kuroha. She's kooky, old, and probably violates too many health codes to be considered a doctor, but I still dig it nonetheless. I just wonder how Sanji and Luffy are going to save Nami though, because if she's in the town over, does that mean they won't be in time to rescue Nami? Nah, obviously she's going to survive. She's a main character, and most importantly, my wife. So my theory is that they'll probably meet at the castle, and there she will treat Nami in the last second, or hey, maybe Chopper will do it, because maybe Chopper knows a lot about medicine from Kuroha and needs to go back to the castle before Kuroha does. Or maybe Kuroha doesn't know actually anything about medicine, as evident with the kid, and it's Chopper that knows all the stuff. I don't know. Either way, we also got to talk about Walpole of 10. Obviously, he was blasted off into the stratosphere, but with his crew coming back to Drum Island, I can only expect a war against the 10 Tyrant Pirates where the Straw Hats, down a Nami and up a Chopper and possibly a Kuroha, are able to actually help and fend off Walpole and his men. Though really, honestly, I loved a lot of other stuff in this chapter, like learning about Blackbeard, which I know is a huge thing in One Piece, so just why did Blackbeard come to Drum Island? Was it to liberate the people from Walpole? Or was it to take Drum Island for himself? Also as well, natural questions that come from this is how powerful is Blackbeard really? After all, he didn't end up fighting anyone. So there are just many questions coming from these first handful of chapters of Drum Island, and I'm very eager to read more. So be sure to become a patron and join my Discord server. By doing so, you'll gain access to my Drum Island Part 2, Part 3, and you know it, Ara Arabasta Part 1 reviews. On top of that, you'll gain access to my exclusive ARC tier lists, and if that doesn't suit your fancy, then check out my other tiers. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.